Hey Harley, how you doing, man? You good?
I'm great. I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. I mean, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me as well. I really do appreciate it.
My
Um,
pleasure.
Not just from a jiu-jitsu perspective as well, from the music side of things. You are a legend in that area. So it is really, really cool to get to speak to you. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
One of the first things I wanted to talk about, before we sort of talk about the upcoming film that, like I say, you've got quite a few things going on at the moment as well with the band. Can I ask, when you sort of like first found jujitsu, because I mean, it's got to be close to 30 years ago now, is it?
Well, you know what? I actually I first discovered it with UFC 1 and 2. And like everybody else, I was immediately like, what's going on here? This is amazing. And so I started looking for a place to train. And I was lucky enough to meet up with Master Renzo Gracie in '96 and started training with him then. And there's been no turning back.
So can I ask then, because there's quite a few years between UFC one would have been what 92, I think. So there's a few
Yeah.
year gap then. What was sort of going on for you at that time?
Well, a lot of things, but also I was traveling a lot and there had no Gracies had moved to New York yet. So they were like all on the all on the West Coast. And, I had been bouncing around the West Coast, but I'm from New York. And when I wound up back in New York, I just started looking and, back then we didn't have all this internet stuff. So it was like I was literally going to magazine corner stores and looking in the back of Black Belt magazine and Kung Fu magazine and looking through the ads in the back, which is how I found Henzo's first academy. And that's that was where it started for me. And it was a really small group of people. He only had there was only one other black belt there besides Henzo, and a couple brown belts and purple belts. And this was before you know, the whole onslaught of Gracie's move to New York, all the guys that started fighting in Pride FC and everybody. So it was pretty early on.
So I know obviously you mentioned Pride, and I know that was something that you were sort of involved in, like the MMA side of jiu-jitsu as well. Did you have many fights during that time? Because I think you've had a few,
Uh,
haven't
I,
you?
I only fought a little bit on the underground here in New York, because it wasn't sanctioned yet. And also, you know what? I'm a musician first and foremost. I used to fight a lot when I was young. So I always enjoyed, you know, I mean, I guess you would call it, hooligan shit over there, I was always getting into fights and scraps with other young kids and shit on the streets. And it's just how I grew up. I always liked fighting. I hate to say that now in this world, you can't really say you like fighting, but whatever. And that's how I grew up. And you know, so when I did start getting really into my jits, I wanted to see if it would really work in a situation where somebody was trying to take my head off and not just in a training environment. So because even when you're training hard with your friends and you are, we used to do stuff with gloves and really, work it, but it's not the same as somebody who wants to take your head off. And that changes everything. It really does, especially if they know a little bit. And guess what? If they're in there, they know a little bit. In fact, they probably know a lot. So yeah.
Did you find that you had much success then on the underground circuit? Like,
Yeah, yeah, but I stopped because I saw a few injuries that were just so ridiculous, like some people that really got really broken. And I was like, wow, there is no medical here. There is like, there's barely people who know what they're doing. And so I was like, maybe this ain't the greatest idea, but you know what? I succeeded at doing what I wanted to do, which was, can I get some clean takedowns? Can I get in good position? Can I do what I got to do? And I enjoyed it. So, it was fun. Wasn't a big, actually, the funny thing is Frankie Edgar started in that same. It was called the UCL Underground Combat League here in the city, and they used to have them in like in boxing gyms and different martial arts academies after hours, and they would sell tickets, and it was you'd find out the location like literally within 48 hours of the fights. It was like really really on the down low.
That's crazy, man. I mean, I think it's one of those things, though, like you said, MMA wasn't really legalized or regulated in New
No,
York at the
no,
time.
not at all, not at all, not at all.
And then obviously going through Renzo Gracie's in that sort of like late 90s period, I imagine you would have done quite a lot of training with like Danaher, Matt Serra, those kind of
Well,
people as well. Because
the
it's
funny thing is, we were all blue belts at the same time. Like there was a moment, and it was a moment. I say literally because again, I'm a musician. I was on tour all the time, and these guys were dedicated. Like and I remember being away on tour for a couple of months, coming back and being like, "Who the fuck are all these new blue belts?" And it was all it was Tanner and Sarah and all and a few other people. But it was like because usually, back then it took a while to get your belts. So I was just like, I hadn't been gone that long. I was like, who the fuck are these guys now? These new blue belts, And well, they didn't say blue belts for long. Let's just put it that way. Some people are just naturally gifted and pursue it with more fanaticism than others.
well, that's one thing as well. You mentioned obviously going away on tour, and I know that's something that's got to be quite hard to deal with. How did you sort of manage to keep up training when you were bouncing around from city to city?
You know what? My training always suffers when I tour, now more so than then, because when I was younger, I would still take chances and just like, I would I would train with people who would come to our shows and shit, just fuck around, because you know how it was back in the day. There wasn't a lot of people to train with anyway. So you would practice with whoever. And my band has a history of attracting, thug type characters. So there was always going to be people there that thought they were tough. So I'd always have somebody who was willing to see what they could do and who would, always offer me an opportunity to try some things. Let's just say that. And but I don't really get to train much on tour. It's enough for me to actually just be in a very I always have a strict exercise routine when I'm on tour. I exercise every day. Like, I mean, I do that anyway when I'm off tour, but I make sure that on tour I don't lose that momentum. You really have to stay in shape. But my jits definitely suffers. But you know what? I'm not a fucking pro fighter. This is life. As you or anybody else knows who has other things that they are involved with, whether it's family responsibility or job responsibility or this or that. I do this because I love it, not because I'm trying to be like, you know, top level competitor out there. I mean, Christ, I'm almost 60, and this really keeps me in shape. I go in there, honestly, I get my ass kicked more than not. I'm training with guys that are bigger than me, better than me, younger than me. And if I get a couple good sweeps or get good positioning and almost finish somebody, I feel like fucking I just won UFC. I'm like, yeah, baby, because at the end of the day, I'm pushing 60 and I'm still in there grinding, having a great time and, taking the lumps. And, like yesterday I went in to train and, you know, who the hell wants to get on that nasty ass grimy subway and go downtown and be in just around all these fucking animals and crazy fucking shit fucks, it's just like this is Manhattan. I don't like dealing with all this bullshit all the time, but when I get there, just like, I leave it all out there, man. I grind hard, I sweat it out, I feel good, and there's a sense of you know, I'm pushing myself. It makes me it gives me that fire. It keeps that fire burning. That's what you need to go through life. You need to be willing to take the ass beating and not give up. Keep going back. And that's what sets us apart from the people who fucking fail at life, you know?
Can I ask then as well, when you mentioned like, like you said, pushing 60 and still managing to get in there every day, do you sort of like
Not every
attribute
day,
that?
often. I get it, just be correct. I train at least 2, 3 days, 2, 3 times a week. And if I can, up to 4. But it depends on, what else I got going on. But I exercise every day, and I do a lot of shadow boxing every day as part of my just exercise routine. I
Nice,
get at
yeah.
least
So I mean, still 3 times a week is still a lot for someone pushing 60, like you said.
well,
It's impressive, man.
well, you know what? I live to impress my fucking self, man. I got 2 young sons. Well, they're like in their early 20s, and they look at me and they're like, "Damn, they want to be." They still say, "Damn, I want to be like you when I'm your age, Dad." And that makes me happy. I know I could still whoop their asses if I have to. Not that I want to, but like I set a standard when my kids were born. I started exercising more than I had prior to that. I was always into exercise and I was always, kind of fit, but I really turned it up a notch then. And there was no turning back. I used to bring their strollers to the gym with me. I would go to the playground and actively play with them and exercise while I was doing it and everything else. And I never stopped. So it's part of my regiment.
So
So
can I ask on like a personal level then, did having kids sort of like change your outlook on things, like physically and
absolutely,
mentally?
absolutely. And ironically, if you see my film, or read my book for that matter, I raised a young girl that I thought was my daughter for a period of time. And when I found out she wasn't, I continued to take on the responsibility of raising her to the point where when her mother fell really deeply into drug use, I kind of took over raising the child, and that right there was what really kind of changed my life, because I had massive drug problems myself, this and that. But when I found out that this child was, you know, on the way and so on and so forth, that was a game changer for me personally. And then, can't come to find out it wasn't my kid. I figured the good things that could come out of it nonetheless were that I was there for this child when needed, and I benefited getting my life together. And it just so happened that it was around the time that I stumbled into the Renzo Gracie Academy in '96. So that was really the jujitsu I was searching for. I was, like I said, thumbing through all the magazines, I had just gotten myself off drugs. I was exercising, pushing myself, trying to get my life together so that I could be responsible for someone other than my drug problem. And then I was, blessed with a series of events. I got myself in a better place physically, mentally, and then I found Master Renzo Gracie, who has really been more like a brother and a friend than like some kind of he is my master in so many ways, but it's not some sort of weird hierarchy. It's more like there's a real genuine love there. When I say Master Renzo Gracie, I don't want to weaken or cheapen that, but it's not so. I don't want to say corny, but he you couldn't I couldn't be I couldn't have a higher respect for someone, you know. He really has been a friend to me. He's taught me jujitsu, which has been so, metaphoric for my personal transformation. He's been there in times of need for me. He walked me through and was there next to me at so many difficult times in my life that no martial arts master that I've ever heard of has ever been with any of their students. It's not as personal, it's more impersonal. It's like, oh, there's the master, I'm over here. Enzo really put his arm around me you know, when I really needed someone for a long time, for like and for my kids' entire lives. You know, I owe that man a great deal.
That's awesome. And then I mean, I think that's something that, in like a wider sense, I think is something that a lot of people sort of benefit from or feel with jiu-jitsu is that it's not that traditional martial art where, like you said, there's like a big separation between the person teaching and all the students. There's jiu-jitsu is so much more informal that I think that does happen more often than not around the world, you know?
I think it's probably something to do with the difference between Brazilian culture and Japanese culture. I think that trickles into the culture of jujitsu, especially when you have ambassadors like Master Renzo Gracie, who was one of the first people to really spread that art and that love here. Because, like I always tell people, I started training for the fighting. You, I stayed with it for the love, ultimately, at the end of the day, which is why I'm still here since '96 to what are we, almost 2026?
Yeah.
So, you don't stay with something that long if it's just about the violence or just about the bone breaking techniques. You stay with it because it gets into your heart and the community and the relationships that you develop. Outside of my wife and my kids and my band members, jujitsu really, that is my social life. you know, I don't go to shows. I play shows. I go on tour, so I'm at shows all the time. But when I'm not working, I'm at the academy or I'm at home, you know.
And I think obviously you've had a chance to sort of continue that culture as well, because I don't know if you still are, but I know you were teaching at Henzo's for a while as well. Are
Oh,
you
it
still doing
was,
that
yeah.
now?
Nah, you know what? I had to bow out of that position because I was starting to tour a lot again. It's funny because I actually just started out there helping out on a couple of days that they were short staffed, and this is when I was a brown belt, so we're going way back. And then my two sons were basically the reason the kids program started because prior to them there was only like one other kid. There was two kids. One of them didn't stay, and one of them was Gianni Grippa, who was one of the early prodigies who came out of there. And so it was like Gianni was training, and he was still a little, whippersnapper himself. And then my kids came in, and they were like 4 and 6, and that's when it was like, okay, we need to start a kids program. So I wound up getting recruited into helping out establishing that, which was fun because I got to really just interact with my kids a lot and play with them and roll around with them and have the joy of that experience. And so I did that for a few years, and then I was doing different, beginners classes and just helping out until I got my black belt and so on and so forth. And then my kids aged out, and I started touring again, because well, life goes on, and that's again, that's what I do. Jiu-jitsu is it's a huge part of my life. It's really one of the things that keeps me happy, keeps me grounded. But music is really it's another extension of who I am. It's like you can't stop doing what you love and what pays you well. And you know what I'm saying? I love what I do, so it's not like I'm sacrificing anything. The only thing I'm sacrificing is when I'm on the road, I don't get to train. Ideally, I would have a high level training partner that can teach me shit while I'm on the road. And I know that like excuse me, my friend Zoltan from Five Finger Death Punch, he travels with his traveling dojo, and I'm like, you motherfucker, I'm so jealous. But he's awesome. God bless him for his achievements. And hopefully one day I'll be able to roll like that myself. And but in the meantime, life is great. You know, I get to the academy as often as I can, and and I have a great job and a great life, great wife. My kids are turning into good young adults. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can't really ask for much more than that, to be fair.
Well,
And and then you kind of touched on it briefly there, like getting the opportunity to actually train with your kids as well and sort of like bring them up
yeah,
in the
yeah,
sport.
yeah. That was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I mean, as life went on, they obviously went on to other things, and but I'm pretty confident that they'll wind up making that turn back into jiu some point in life. And maybe I pushed them a little too hard early on in life, but things happen, and one's in college, and the other one is living on his own, paying his own bills, and you know, not he's helping other people out more than he's asking for help, which is for me, I'm like, wow, he's 22 years old and he's not asking me for shit. He's taking care of himself and he's paying all his own bills. you know, that's pretty awesome. I'm quite impressed.
Nice. And then I think you mentioned something as well. It's a really tough balance to strike for any like parent in the sport, dad or mum.
Yeah,
The balance of trying to get them involved in it because you want them to, but then not, like you said,
yeah.
pushing them too far. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you know what? There's that, but you got to kind of let kids do their thing. I tried to make it fun, but in our situation, there was other elements as well. Me and their mother separated, they moved, and that caused them to lose that uh, place. So on and so forth. You know, would things have still turned out that way? Possibly. You know, who knows? But I still think it's one of the greatest experiences that you can have as a parent. And I'll tell you this though, doing it with your kids, that's where it's at. Dropping them off and letting some instructor roll around with your kids and let your kids roll around like preschool, like they're at a kindergarten class or whatever. Eh, you know, I'm a hands-on parent. I enjoyed playing with my kids. I wasn't one of these people who like stood there next to my stroller like, hey, let's watch the kids play. Eh, who the hell wants to do that? I want to play with my kids. That's part of why I started exercising like mad when I had them, because I was like, I want to keep up with them. I want to be like chasing them down, kicking their ass till they're like grown ass men. I want to be having fun with them. This is where life begins. And I'll tell you right now, man, with all the shit that I've been through, and I've been through, read my book, watch my film. Um, no plugs intended. But I could have easily given up at any point in time. And I'm living my best life now because I didn't. And so in a lot of ways, that's jujitsu right there, man. Like I didn't feel like going in and getting my ass kicked yesterday. I knew I was going. I hadn't trained in almost 2 months because I've been on tour, and I knew my training partner had been in there like religion, like a good 5, 6 days a week, going hard. And I'm like, man, this motherfucker got 50 pounds on me. He's younger than me. He's better than me, and he's been training. And I'm going in there to get smashed. But I went in, and every time I was like getting totally just like the exhaustion, the everything was just breaking me down. I'm like, I'm not gonna not until not until he really really gets me. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight, and I'm gonna fight. And he smashed me for a good hour, but you know what? I never gave up, and I feel like that builds character. It just gives you that fight that you need.
100%, man. And obviously, you mentioned it a couple of times now, but I want to sort of give you a chance to speak about it as well. You've got the film coming up now, Wired for Chaos.
Yeah.
Um, was it already out in the States now? Is that right? Or you've already done the
We
premiere?
did a movie theater run in the States. It was in the theaters all over the States, and I traveled around doing a lot of Q&As with it. And I think next week we're flying to Barcelona for the In Edit Film Festival, where I'm going to be, I believe, doing a Q&A with it there. Bunch of really cool films are showing. And then off to the UK, where we got about 5 or 6 dates with the film where I'm going to be there doing that thing again. And so, that's been fun. And obviously Henzo's in it. Matt Serra's in it. Jocko Willink is in it, who I You know, it's funny. I had neck surgery. Right? I had pretty major neck. I had 8 screws put in my neck. I had elbow and wrist surgery, and it took me out of training for a while, almost 3 years, in fact. About 3 years. I was really nervous about getting back on the mats because I had so much work done in here, you know. And but when we went when I went and saw Jocko out on the West Coast at Victory MMA, I was like, you know what? I gotta train. It was the first time I had trained since I had all the surgeries, but I was like, I just have to. I just have to say that I got down with Jocko. I just got to do it. I got to get down. So, you know, I went in there. I felt like shit. I had enrolled. My brain was so foggy. I didn't know nothing, but that was the beginning of me getting back on the path. So, oh, my cat. So if you hear a cat, okay. I think this may be his first podcast or interview. But anyway, so that was my welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu was Jocko Willing. And, you know, he's one of the most inspiring people out there. So if that couldn't get me back on the mats, then, you know, nothing could.
Awesome, man. Awesome. No, it's good to hear that you've been like able to get back into it after that, and that the tour for the film has been going well as well.
Yeah, it's been going great, man. It's been going great. The film has been, people have been receiving it really well. You know, believe it or not, people have seem to really identify with the story, you know, even though they may not have lived a life like mine. There's a lot of things in it that pretty much I think anybody can relate to, whether it's, you know, trauma in general, whether it's coming from a broken family, dealing with drug abuse, or people who have had drug issues, or just, you know, the struggles that go along with poverty and everything else. You know, there's a lot of things in here that I think people can relate to. And, you know, even if you haven't lived a life like mine, everybody walks away saying, damn, I really connected with that. So, you know, it's pretty intense, man. And jiu-jitsu saves lives.
Well, I think
Not
that's a
just
good
on the
note.
streets.
No, man, I think that's a good note to sort of wrap it up on as well. And I can't wait to see it, genuinely. If you want to let everyone know, you know, what dates to look out for in the UK or in Europe.
You know what? I would love to, but off the top of my head, I don't have them sitting here in front of me. However, you can go to wiredforchaos.com. You could also go to Wired for Chaos Film on Instagram, and that'll have all the dates. And we're going to be there in just over a week. We're going to be a bunch of showings in London and Birmingham and all over the place. You know, I can't even think because it's all been going so fast.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me today, Harley. I really do appreciate it, man.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No worries at all. Take care. Take it easy.